Hello, players who will kill themselves before they give their DM a shred of satisfaction.
And first-time DMs who have no idea what setting they want to play in, so they instead make a setting where you can do all of them.
Welcome back to Table Talk. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Robert.
What are we talking about today?
So today is more of a goof episode.
We prep for the next couple ones, which there's going to be one that's very exciting coming up with a guest artist.
We're going to start having guests on, but the next one, hopefully after this, will be either combat or the guest episode. It just depends on which one happens first. But I want to prep a little bit before I just start making shit up, which kind of happened a little bit in the last few. And it just makes it difficult. So today we're just going to talk about our previous campaign, the one that myself and Madison have played in. Or I guess I DM'd Madison's first official campaign going all the way through. And just kind of shooting the shit about that, talking about kind of where it started, story points, things we liked, things we didn't. This might be a 2-parter or 3, just depends. Because there were technically 2 halves of it that we split between 2 separate semesters. So there was episode 1 and episode 2, or section 1, section 2. I never came up with a formal way to
I just called it volume 1 and volume 2.
Yeah, volume 1 and volume 2 works. Which that in and of itself is kind of a fun topic. How do you go about participating in a campaign that could potentially go longer than you have the available commitment to participate in?
Because it's still very much, we could pick this up and keep going.
Yeah, we could go back. There are enough plot holes, or not holes, but enough plot hooks that we could continue that storyline.
Indefinitely.
What would it would have been January of 2022?
Oh my god.
Yeah, because 2021
that
December.
That makes me want to vomit.
Well, I always remember 2021 December was when I got money for a project I'd worked on for a very long time. So I always remember that 2022 in January was when we went. It's also where I had my 21st, because I'm always a year behind whatever year it is. So if it's 2046, I'm 45.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just ADHD, fun things, or fun ways.
No, you always find weird, if it's something that's 30 minutes away, it's not actually 30 minutes away. It is 5 minutes away.
Mm-hmm. No, dead ass. It's 5 minutes to the car and 10 minutes down the road away. It's not 20 minutes.
Yeah. It is. That got me through dance class as a child, because I have a very complicated relationship with dance, and it would always be me looking at the clock and I'm like, okay, we don't have 45 minutes left. We just have 5 minutes several times.
Yeah, that's what gets me through some of my classes. I mean, the one class I'm in, shout out to Social Problems with Platoon. I love it, but sometimes I zone out, and so the only way I can get through it is by oh look, there's only 10 minutes until 3:30, which means it's only 30 minutes away from 4. So if I could just write out this 10 minutes, I'll be a little closer to getting the fuck out.
Yeah,
it's very. And then I
ignore
play
the can
iTag.
sound.
Nope. Nice.
It was so
And then
loud.
I just play iTag with the clock. But anyways, and it's just an odd thing about playing D&D, sitting down for a campaign that has the potential to go on for a really long time. And it's the bane of a lot of tables, is that people don't have the time, or they turn into adults, or they suddenly get new jobs and different schedules. And
I'll say this was the perfect setting for us for a D&D campaign to begin, because we were studying abroad. We were all living in the same building, and we didn't have cars. We were basically in a boarding school for several months, and
we're always in the same place with the same group of people. So
yeah.
You didn't I didn't have to go through the experience of trying to wrangle schedules or
not until the next
semester, where I had to start letting people not letting people, where I had to start writing people out every other session because they just didn't schedule properly, or their lives were too busy.
Or we found out last minute that someone had tickets to a concert or was leaving town and didn't tell us.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, anyone that's played the game or has even attempted to play the game understands that
it's the hardest part.
The bane of starting is the fact that people have lives.
Yeah. It's just don't have a life.
It's
just
at minimum
dice.
A 2 to 3 hour activity. So you got to figure out 2 to 3 hours that the same 6. I mean, that's what average size of a table is 5 to 6, 4 to 6.
I would say 4 to 6.
Somewhere in 4 to 6. So God forbid you have 6 people schedules that you have to line up the same 3 hours weekly. Because
we played for longer than that. We would play
we played for 6-7 hours. Because we would pick a day during the week where we weren't traveling, we weren't doing anything, and then we would just write it until I was essentially out of shit to do.
Yeah, and then it would be cool, good night.
Yeah, and then I would just be well, that's all I can come up with, or this is a suitable cliffhanger, and I don't know what to go off of because I haven't done
Yeah.
any writing past this point. So see you next week.
There was a TikTok you sent me. It was like when the party finds out a plot hook, and then you're like, "Well, we've got to keep going for another 30 minutes so I
Yeah.
can wrap this up." And that's like a very real thing that happens at D&D tables.
Well, you
where
in
it's like,
particular are always asking fucking questions, like expecting me to just slip one of these days and give you the answer.
Yeah.
And like that was the TikTok. It was basically like there's the player asked the DM, like, so why was this guy immune to being charmed? And he goes, yeah, he was. Because this, like, and then he like dropped his
like
race.
shapeshifters are immune to being charmed.
Yeah, his answer was
some shit.
shapeshifters are immune to being charmed, and it was like a major PC. So then it was like, well, looks like we have another 30 minutes of play to go, so I can figure that one out.
One of these days, I'm gonna ask, and you are gonna slip up, and I'm gonna get answers.
Yeah, but it's always fun trying to like get your DM to slip up and be like, so yeah, this is here's the answer. Oh well, fuck, I didn't want to tell you that. Which
players do that all the time at our table.
Oh my god, all the time, man, all the fucking time.
The amount of time
role playing is difficult, but like also remember your character. Like holy fuck,
it happens so many times in our current campaign, which isn't even what this episode was supposed to be about. But I feel like I need to share this story because it's so funny. Which is one of our characters is playing like a really edgy. Like an edgy guy. Batman light character. And he is siblings with another character in the campaign. And none of us are supposed to know that.
Yep.
And the only reason we do is because like we're present at the table when other things are being discussed. And he immediately, first session in, goes, "Oh yeah, my brother." And we went, "Who?" And he went, "Oh yeah, my brother, so and such." And we were like, "What?"
And like the character's supposed to be very like close to the chest and like secretive, and I mean Batman, like, and he just, bless his little heart, he didn't get that.
Just immediately like, and then was like, "Oh, I'm also rich. Do you guys want me to like pay your tuition?"
Yeah, your medical bills, and it's just a fun. He's very much like a dad Batman character in that like he's a nice person in real life to a fault, and so it's not really in his repertoire to play like a more cold, kind of meaner character. Like he's just nice all the time, and then he's like, "I'm gonna go torture somebody real quick."
And we're like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, here's $20. Go get ice cream. I'll be back.
It's
a fun like little character thing because he's basically just like dad Batman, like fully leaning into the dad side of things. But to get back on track, we started when we were studying abroad, and the intro, the intro I was talking about, first time DMs that don't know what setting to do. So they do all of them was exactly what I did. We've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes, I think in our session 0 where we kind of introduced ourselves and how we started playing together. But it basically was just a big group chat for everybody that was there. And then it was like, here are a few random group chats for people that were interested in playing D&D. And then, of course, the question is like, who wants to be a DM? And I'd played in a campaign before, only one. And so, of course, I was like, yeah, I'll DM. Why not? Didn't have any experience with it. I had no idea what I was doing, but I mean, it worked out. It was a lot of fun. But I finally get a group together. The other group falls apart, and it's just like me and 4 or 5 other people. I mean, 3 of them, technically 3 of them I knew beforehand, but there were an additional 2.
Not that well.
Yeah, not that well. There were an additional 2 that joined that I ended up getting to know pretty well. One I had already knew from university, and the other person I had just seen around. But anyways, 5 group of people. And so I'm literally just like Googling stuff in my spare time while I'm in the middle of class as I take notes on my laptop, and I'm just like settings to play D&D in. Of course, like you get like the Fey Room places, you get the Feywild, you get every fucking source book Wizards has put out ever.
Yeah, Sword Coast.
Sword Coast, of course, huge. Your favorite, Witchlight Carnival. Fairhaven, which ended up being a pretty central location. Like, there's just
unintentionally.
If you understand anything about D&D or the wealth of knowledge that exists out there about it, you know that there are a lot of places that you could potentially play in.
Oh, yeah.
Theater of the mind, it's endless. So I was like, fuck it. What if I just like had a place where you could go anywhere? Because that would be a cool way to introduce everybody to the game. And it actually ended up being exactly that, which is pretty fun. But I ended up stumbling upon this place online called The World Serpent's End. It was mentioned in 3rd edition a few times, kind of just as this throwaway location, where like the whole idea was that the room is always filled with smoky blue mist, and like you can never really see from like one end to the other, and there are like beings from all these different planes, and then there's one bartender who's like always there, And then there are these doors that lead to like everywhere, but there's never like a way to figure out what door leads to which. With the exception of like this big central set of double doors that opens up periodically to different locations in different times.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, why not take all of that on for the first time instead of doing
Which was definitely a choice.
Instead of doing like Goblin Hunters in a dungeon in Torrid Coast, I was like, what if we just did the multiverse for the first time?
Which worked out, but like looking back, it was crazy choice.
It was a bold choice on my end. And then we just sat down and made the characters. I mean, Madison is always. You've always liked D&D. You've always made characters.
I've always like had interest in D&D. I came from, and I've kind of mentioned before, a lot of my background. I make a lot of characters and I make a lot of stories and universes. But I'm not a writer. I try to be. So it's a lot of the time these things kind of either sit in my head or I do really embarrassing things with them on TikTok.
I am now out of necessity.
Yeah, I mean, like you've
because I need
been
to be
converted.
Yep.
But I have wanted to play D&D for a really long time, and I had this idea for a character, and it did not end up being that character. I wanted to make like a jester, like a little jester character, and that's definitely not who I ended up playing. But it was really fun, and it was also cool to be given the freedom of like make a character. The setting that you make them in, the time doesn't matter.
So irrelevant. So
and it was always
irrelevant.
like very confusing. So I was like, I'm just gonna make a character, and then can you like give me a location? And he was like, yeah, you're gonna be in this place called Fairhaven. And I was like, cool. So I like looked up the books, and I was like plugging some of that stuff in. But I was like, this isn't gonna be relevant, right?
Another very generic like location with a lot of people in it.
Yeah.
Well, because your idea for the character was kind of like steampunky, and like some of the clothing, and so I was like, "Cool, time to Google steampunk locations in 5th edition." And Fairhaven came up relatively quickly.
She had a cool ass outfit.
Yeah, Fairhaven came up pretty fast. It's set on a larger world called Eberron, and Eberron is basically just it's just another fantasy universe. And
steampunky. There's a lot of war.
Yeah, there's a lot of war.
Ton of war.
A lot of like there were originally a large nation, and then it got broken up into 5 nations. Very Airbender-esque in that way.
Yeah.
But Fairhaven in particular was like the one place that always stayed very technologically advanced. Used a lot of like steampunky kind of stuff. Magic isn't like the most prevalent. It's more like mechanical kind of stuff. They have airships. They have royal family, like all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. So I made a high elf sorcerer named Magnolia Bonnie. That was not her real name, but that was like kind of her chosen name that she gave herself. And she, so wild magic sorcerer with a -2 to Arcana. And she was not a bard, thank you very much. She was a performer, but stop fucking mistaking her for a bard. And that was probably my favorite character introduction of all time at our tables.
Oh yeah, which
fun. Was
she burned down a fucking house.
Yeah, it was. We had like watched Legally Blonde a couple nights before, and I mentioned that it would be funny because she was like a serial dater. For it to open with her like getting dumped or something. So it opens with her getting dumped in a tavern, and it was like immediately so real. Like I guess that's what, like I was initially like, oh, this isn't like a game.
Like dump me, and I was like, all right, I'll dump you.
It was
we'll
like
do it, man.
Personal shit. It was like your fucking family doesn't love you.
Yeah, you're
and
not
you're
a
like,
real magician. Like
yeah,
you're
like
a
it was
half-ass jester who flunked out of magic school.
Like it was messy, and I was like, okay. We're immediately in this bitch, and it turns into her like, and it like opens like Legally Blonde of her like getting dumped in a very public tavern, and he's like, people are staring at you, and she like throws a wine glass at him, and like it's messy, and then she decides, yeah, I'm gonna go burn down his house.
His family house, by the way, that is also his family flower shop.
Yeah, and she was like...
It's not just like a cottage in the middle of fuck nowhere. It's like a legitimate house that holds
it's
people.
like downtown. And everyone else's character introductions were like pretty chill. It was like, you're hunting in the woods, and you come across a building, and then it was
everybody wanted that fun of an intro. Sam was like, I want to be like basically Legolas, but a lot less cool in the woods, which is a Lord of the Rings reference. He's basically just a fucking guy with a bow and an elf, and he's really good, and he jumps on rocks midair. Yeah, bow and arrow, whatever. And then you had Rayon with Dakota, who was basically just a half orc, who just liked to hit things.
Yeah.
And then you had a wizard,
and a bard.
Oh yeah, we did have a bar, did we?
But yeah, I decided to really have fun with it, and it immediately went off the rails. And it was, what? So you're gonna you're gonna break into the shop and burn the house down? And he was like, "Cool." Sirens start going off,
Yeah,
and I was like,
police.
"Oh fuck, cop!"
The fire brigade.
And immediately she just kind of gets like KO'd out of there because a like magical flower shows up and is like, "Do you want to leave?" And I was like, "Yes." But that character's introduction was very fun.
Yeah. So my idea for that going into it was I was like, if we're gonna do the multiverse, let's multiverse it the fuck out, man. So everybody's character intro started in a different realm, or at least different location. Fucking Simeon, our bard, shout out to David, was basically ancient Greece, because I didn't really understand that Theros was a location beforehand.
So now canonically, there's Theros and ancient Greece are two separate
two
locations.
entirely separate locations, because I rolled in the real ancient world god Apollo from like Greek mythology. Listen, I definitely crossed some of the wires, but Theros...
well, you didn't plan that we were still going to be playing this game a year later.
No, I didn't. But Theros, for the audience, is basically... Wizards owns, I've talked about this before, Magic the Gathering, which is like a cardboard playing game. And they created this setting because they basically released their cards in blocks called Theros, or Adventures into Theros. And because Wizards owns both Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons...
There's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, enough people were interested in like the Theros setting, which is basically just like an ancient Greece knockoff kind of deal, that they decided to give it its own source book. And I didn't know that Theros was a place before I created ancient Greece in the settings. So then they ended up actually going to Theros, and I just kind of retconned a lot of what happened with like ancient Greece related things. But yeah, that's where that started. Then we had another person who was a wizard. What the fuck was he? You remember what his subclass was?
Not a fucking clue.
Son of
He
a
hated
bitch.
us.
Yeah, I can't remember what.
Character-wise.
Ephon was his name.
Oh,
Shout out to
yeah,
Spencer.
I knew his name.
I don't remember what subclass of wizard he was, but he was a wizard.
Like just the most like classic wizardy.
Yeah, like he had all the utility spells, all the ridiculously high arcana checks. He was kind of like a bookworm, like a scholar, so he like knew how to read and speak a bunch of languages and like had a bunch of spells to identify things. And so his intro happened in this like cursed land of sand, basically this giant rock in the middle of nowhere that's been turned into like, what's the fucking? It's a Star Wars thing.
Sarlacc.
Yeah, kind of like that area. Well, what's the place where Jabba the Hutt's at?
Tatooine.
Yeah, like it's more of like a Tatooine place.
Okay.
Yeah, like in like a seedy underground kind of thing. And him and like his partner go there to like solve a curse or to like investigate the place because everyone says it's cursed. And then it just kind of devolved into there. His friend ended up getting sucked into hell. Yeah, there was a whole lot of behind the scenes going on with that. And I was just trying to plug in a bunch of stuff. And the idea behind that was I kind of wanted to roll in hell like a little bit, because the idea behind the plot was that there were a bunch of like deities and gods and goddesses, and basically just beings of the divine nature that were all very interested in the broader story. And so I was trying to figure out how to connect Ephon to that story. And so it was a pretty fun thing too. Like he managed to roll really well and played his intro super good. Like I said, Brayon was just a half orc. So we opened up with a war, which is pretty cool. Like a lot of his family were dying and like brothers in war. And then he goes into this like forgotten, like abandoned dwarven's basically like stronghold to chase down one of his brothers who's gone missing in like the heat of battle. And ends up watching him like run through a door, and so his immediate instinct is like, "Cool, like I got to go get him," and then runs through the same door, and then ends up ends up in a tavern, along with everybody else. Ephon also ended up in a tavern. Magnolia also ended up in a tavern.
Shoeless, having vomited, but also the only one to land on their feet and not get knocked the fuck out.
Yeah, everyone else just kind of like kerplunked and went prone and a little unconscious. And then Ragbad, our Legolas elf, shout out to Sam.
Forgot how dumb
Basically,
that name was.
he was just there being a guy with the land, using the bow and arrow, and was like investigating this house that like people
and
had
then
been
almost
going
died
missing
immediately.
And it was a very simple puzzle, but dear God, guy could not roll to save his life, so he basically almost got crushed to death in this house. Came out of it mostly okay. ends up falling, whatever. And then also everybody got a magical item in their intro as well, which was pretty cool. I had a lot of fun with that. Ifan got a book, which ended up being, Jesus Christ, I did not expect that book to be as central to the story as...
the campaign.
Yeah, the book was the campaign. Magnolia got her flower.
Which, remember that, that comes back.
Ended up being super big in the campaign.
Yeah.
Ragbad basically got like an arrow tip, like a magical arrow tip that he could then attach to like other arrows and use them to do things. He didn't use it all that fucking often, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And it took him a while to figure out what it could be used for.
Yeah.
But part of that's my fault. I wanted to make it very like, I don't know. I fancy myself as a kind of twisty person. So I wanted it to be like, you're going to hear the word that I say in the next sentence and be like, holy shit, that thing you said from the first session, it all clicked in place. It didn't happen. It happened a few times, but only because I like beat them over the head with it. And I was like, here's this thing that I put in the fucking first session. Connect the dots. And then they're like, oh shit, that is how that works. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So I've made my hooks more obvious going forward. At the time, I was expecting too much of a group of first players. So, pro tip for your DMs: don't make your hooks too confusing.
Yeah. It's also one of those things that like you look like a fucking idiot if you start looking for it and it's not there, and you're like, this one inconsequential thing you said in the first session, and then you like keep bringing it up, and then the DM's like,
no,
fucking,
nope.
No. Like, that's just a bank.
Oh, it's like
it's just a guy.
It's like Fantasy High with Gorgug and his father. Like it never really became a consequential thing, but it just became a bit. So it's like every time he met another male person, he was like, "Are you my father?
Are you my dad?"
It never played a significant role in the campaign, not once, but like it continued to happen.
I fully expected it to be like the bad guy is his dad,
or something like that. Yeah.
And then no, it was just like a random.
Yeah, those kinds of things just get turned into jokes, like for real. But yeah,
the last one shot we played this weekend, originally it was supposed to be a thing where my character was asking people if they were religious, and then people found that extremely funny, and then it was just like, cool, I guess I've committed to this bit of asking every single person if they're religious.
Not a single person answered yes.
No, which in the world of D&D, baffling.
It took place in the city of Waterdeep, which is like basically Gotham, but 5e, so everyone's pretty much seen horrible fucked up things, and so there can't be a god. Or gods, plural. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not...
There are! That's
there are.
The thing that gets me!
Yeah, there literally are.
This is a world in which gods very much exist. This is not like me going up to people on the street being like, are you religious?
And she was a paladin, too, so, like, her powers had to come from deity.
I was a paladin angel, like ASMR, but she was flavored to look exactly like a cartoon angel.
Yeah.
And it's like this very clearly holy person. There's like ethereal music playing, and she's got giant wings. She's like, are you religious? And they're like, nah, there is no God. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what?
Yep. But, Breon, our half-orc, got the location that he's running through ended up being one of the first major combat encounters they had, which was really cool. And then his magical item ended up being like, it kind of like a suit sort of deal. Like he ripped off a piece of like basically a magical portal trying to get to his brother, and came to life, latched onto him, basically like bit him. It reduced his movement speed, but it increased his AC and gave him a bunch of other benefits. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the idea that like it was like the door came to life and it was parasitic and whatever. I gave everybody a different piece of the puzzle to open the same door, and then it just didn't happen that way. So, anyways, the magical item...
notes from this. It's some of these interactions that I wrote down are funny as fuck.
The magical item that I gave Simeon, our bard, sea elf, basically was just like a holy lute that my mans could just play whenever he wanted to, and also was like naturally a light all the time. So I just gave them like a permanent torch, and then its like secondary function was being able to like identify like deity kind of like areas or locations, or like figure out like kind of point in the direction of something that's holy or unholy. So kind of just like a divine metal detector. And then that was my plot device, because I had a very long thought, which was going to be like the loot was going to be instrumental to like healing something, and it kind of did, but then he bailed just because life got too busy for him, so that just ended up getting thrown away. It was actually supposed to be a really big thing, and it turned out to be nothing.
So much of that campaign went that way, though.
A lot of, not the first semester, but the second semester. People were just dropping like fucking flies, man.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, that's kind of how all the character intros went. They all were in a different place, and they all got to the same tavern, basically like kind of summoned there in a way. And, there's this idea that your goal as a DM should be to get your party to, like, party. You know what I'm saying? Like,
to get along.
Do they all meet at the same time? Do they know each other before? Do they have the same mutual interest? I have never seen a more dysfunctional and disinterested group of PCs in my life. None of them wanted to be there.
Bad.
None of them had interest in working together.
No.
They all just wanted to go the fuck home. And that's all their motivations.
Not even in like a way of like, guys, let's work together so we can get the fuck out of here. It was like, I fought every single member of the party.
They were literally forced together with divine intervention.
It was PvP at all.
It was. And divine intervention was the only thing that kept them together because I kept forcing them together.
People kept trying to leave.
Yep. They just, it wouldn't work. It didn't happen because I was like, you can't keep running away from this.
God, it was bad.
Yeah. I don't even have a pro tip for that. Like, I don't know how to fix that.
And it didn't get better.
No, it never improved until the second semester because then we had some, like, people that were nice and kind.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens.
Like, trauma bonded.
Never happened in the first semester, though. So real.
Everyone was just like, well, if he's going to walk through the door and he's got a piece that I need, I guess I'm going through the door, too. It was never like, oh, yeah, I like him as a person now. We're going to hang out and, like, solve the puzzle together.
Yeah. Volume 2, we grew to like each other most of us grew to like each other.
Volume 1 was basically just the first 30 minutes of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, only they never get better. Yeah. It's just them trying to kidnap each other and shoot one another.
Yeah.
And, like, achieve the same goal, but through really ass-backwards ways.
Like, there was healing each other, but it was, like, not good. Like, I remember this specific instance where my character got shot by a dwarven ballista and was harpooned into the wall several feet off the ground at 0 hit points. I was dying, and I was like, I had a fucking javelin through my chest.
And they were like, she'll be okay.
And I was like, can anyone come over and help me? And everyone was like, you'll be fine, right? And I was like, I'm on death saving throws. We eventually got it was fucking Ragbad, that goddamn asshole.
Who had zero interest in doing anything for anybody.
And came over, and one of the fucking bard had like done healing words, so I was no longer like dying.
But
I was still stuck.
By a spider.
Immediately got KO'd. But still stuck in the wall, and I had like once again I had several negatives, and I had a significant negative to strength. So I was like, "There's no way I'm getting off the wall." Mm-hmm. And he came over, and he was like, "Oh, well, you're like alive again, so I'm gonna go." And I went, "No, I could use the help." And this motherfucker legitimately wasted a real life turn walking over, and then walking the fuck away. To avoid helping me. And I think about that so often because what the fuck? Truly, what the fuck was that? Like, there was no character growth there. And it stayed that way until the end of the campaign.
Until the end of that character in particular. His second character was a lot better. Kind of.
Was he?
Yeah, I mean, like, to an extent. Did he ever have a character change?
No.
In episode 2?
He dived into a portal of hell. Hey, this shit sucks. Do you have something you want to send in to make it better? Criticisms, topics you'd like to see discussed, or an advertisement you'd like to run? Maybe you even want to sponsor an episode.
If so, shoot us a message at mc460@evansville.edu or DM us on Instagram at Crescent Magazine. Or we'll never get better like these fucking guys. Was that his last?
Yeah, that was his last action.
No, I mean, did Sam continue to play with us after that, or was that his last session?
No, he played
who did he switch to?
The vampire.
Oh yeah, how do I forget about the sexy vampire? That fucking character was hilarious. We'll talk about a fucking, I don't know. What have you been calling it? Something 2?
Volume 2.
We'll talk about Volume 2 in a different episode. But yeah, he Sam makes fucking so interesting characters. Like, they're either like drop dead boring or they're fucking hilarious.
And there's not an in between. And
between.
I don't think he has control over it.
No, they're just two different versions of Sam. One where he's vested and one where he's not vested. And it just depends on kind of what character and what personality you're getting that day. So yeah, but I mean, he's fun to watch play too, though, because he's hilarious. Yeah, he says the funniest shit at the table.
I was about to say I would like to scroll down, and this is one of the things I have written in my notes from the second session because I take obsessive notes.
Oh, yeah, she's the note taker. She's the note taker to the max.
I have 3 to 4 page notes for every single session.
More than I do. I don't even have notes. I just started putting notes for the campaign that I've been running for
I take such
2 months.
Incredibly detailed. Robert will ask me character names.
Because I don't remember who the fuck.
And
I don't remember what name I
locations
gave
and
them.
details because I remember them obsessively. But there was this period where they'd all gotten in, and there were all little doors that popped up that were clear to each person. And that's where we got our magical items. And everyone decided to go through this one door. And the big thing with the doors is that once you go in them, you can't get back out. Like, you've got no control over the doors. And they all go into this one door, and then the door disappears, and they're all just stuck in a room. And it was like everyone in the party except for my character, because I said, I don't know you all. This was also me as a player not working with the team. I don't know you all. I'm not going in a room with you all. If I don't know you.
Magnolia was so fucking obstinate in the first half of this. Like, it truly was pulling teeth to try and get the character to interact with another character.
I recognize that. But I've grown.
You have grown.
I've grown a lot.
She ended up being...
She grew a lot. She ended up...
the glue in the second iteration, which
sometimes unwillingly.
A lot of growth. But yeah, the first one, it was like, I don't trust anybody. And these are untrustworthy people. And then you gave me
trauma to not trust anyone. So you just fed into that.
Well, I didn't expect your character to be as obstinate and untrustworthy as she was. So I had already planned that trauma in advance. And
so it just got worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I could have unwritten those plot points, but, they were tied to so many other things that I was like, I just kind of have to go through with it. And it was this character that was learning to trust people, and then I just took it all away, multiple times. It kept happening.
Repeated. And we'll get into that when we talk about Volume 2.
Volume 2 as well.
But, so they're all stuck in this room. They're all trying to figure out how to get out, and their fix for it was, hey, magic. So let's all hold hands and chant the word door over and over and over.
And it worked.
It didn't work. I was on the outside, and I rolled
really,
really well.
Combined effort.
To create a door. And this is the one thing I've written down under Ragbad's character and an example of an interaction between the two. And it was they're chanting the word door, holding hands, and Magnolia just walks up, creates a door, opens it, and goes, hello. And it says that it was Ragbad was just sitting there and goes, hey. As he's holding hands with these people, and they're chanting the word door, and she's just like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
So that was...
It was a lot, man. It was
bad.
Yeah, it was. It was also unnecessarily convoluted behind the scenes. Dear God, there were so many plot points that you all never touched or got a hold of or put together.
Yeah. And the more we talk about it, the more it sounds like we just hate Volume 1. I didn't hate it.
It was a lot of fun. It was new for all of us. And so a lot of our decisions, both as player and DM, were just first time things that you probably would never do in in another campaign.
Yeah. I would never play a character that edgy again. And I know I continued to play her for a year, but she had growth.
Well, I was just in my mind, I was this basically just female Batman, but there's kind of an equivalent with Catwoman. And Catwoman is also the same, never gonna trust a person. We're friends. Psych, bitch, I've robbed you.
Yeah.
Deuces.
She was that. She was actively, harming other members of the party.
Yep.
She got into a physical altercation with every single member of the party.
The every person for themselves thing gets old very quickly.
But it was everyone in the
party
was like that. So it was just worse. It was just
Simeon wasn't. Simeon was hey guys, let's be friends.
Yeah.
I'm a cool beach bro. And everyone else was get fucked. I'm glad that you're happy. Actually, no, I hate that you're happy. I'm unhappy.
Yeah.
Let me go home.
And and looking at them, and
And Ifan was just excited to be there as like a scholar. He was like, "This is so fun to figure out and learn."
2 people were excited to be there,
and 3 were not.
And 3 were not. 2 of those 3 actively hated each other.
Yeah. One guy was, I want to go home because I just left in the middle of a war. The other one guy was just like, I don't really vibe with this setting. I don't know why I'm here. This is really unimportant to me as a person, and I have no interest. And then you were just like, what is happening?
I was like, I kind of fuck with the location, but I don't fuck with these people.
Mm-hmm. A location where you can reinvent yourself and go anywhere, any of the time.
Yeah, and I was like, that's my dream come true. That's literally exactly what this character wants.
Yeah.
However, these bitches are not.
So
the vibes were rancid.
To get into a little bit of the plot, or at least the setup, I had just played the God of War remake. Loved it. I played it start to finish. I've platinumed it on PlayStation. Like, I have all the trophies. I've played it on the hardest difficulty. I spent 12 hours on a boss fight. Like, I love that game. I love the game that came after it. And I've always liked mythology, hence why there were multiple mythologies present in the campaign. Ancient Norse being one of them, and then, of course, Ancient Greece, which I just fucking retconned. Once Apollo showed up, I was just like, cool, he's gone now.
I loved, and this is jumping forward, in Volume 2 during one of our big fights, Apollo was there, and then also Helioid was there.
Because I was like, Which
is the Theros equivalent of Apollo.
It
so
is.
It was like...
it's like Zeus and Apollo had a child, because it's the... Helioid is like, I believe that I'm the best and the strongest and should have, like, dominion over everything. So his powers are light-based, so it's like everything that touches the light, but then, like, he's also got the Zeus complex, and where it's like, I'm better than all of you.
Yeah, it was the
minus the
equivalent
rape
of, like,
and incest and...
If, like, Zeus and Jupiter were, like, in the same room.
Yeah, it was a lot. But, yeah, I had to tie that off, because I was like... David had to bounce because of personal things, and so the character of Simeon, who actually played a huge fucking story role with everything, just fucking poofed out of existence.
Yeah, canonically, I killed him a little.
We had a really cool fucking, like, pre-session, because I had a pre-session with everybody to talk about whether or not they wanted to play the same characters or not. And I had a really cool pre-session with him, and he basically went on, like, a spiritual journey, where, like, he picked up powers from, like, Hindu religion and, like, different religions, like, across time, very traditional to, like, Earth, nothing super crazy outside of that, but, like, it was gonna be really cool, and then it just fucking wasn't, because maybe had a bounce, so I was like, how do I pull on him? Really what happened was my players were getting their asses kicked by too many enemies, and one that was really big and really powerful, and I was like, this is an appropriate time to bring in David's character for, like, one last hurrah, and I was like, you know how we're gonna intervene? Apollo, the physical version, is just gonna show up and, like, 1v1 mini Tiamat, which is exactly what happened.
And it was sick as fuck.
It was really sick.
Act like it wasn't sick as fuck.
And it was the exact boost that they needed to, like, kind of win that individual fight.
Which
but anyways,
kind of sucked because no one in that part. I'm getting too far into Volume 2.
I know.
But that's
gonna rein it back in. So I had this idea that I wanted it to be, like, involve a lot of different mythologies, and I also wanted it to be kind of multiverse. And you guys have already heard a little bit about, like, how they all came from different places, and none of them wanted to fucking work together, because, like, they basically all got kidnapped from their homes, and then all wanted to go back, and so it was kind of like...
Me.
Yeah, except for her. She was the only person that was like, you know, I'm actually cool with being here. Like, you all can go, and I'll stay. Except she also ended up being a really, like, required piece to progress the story, which was also, like, me going, hey, you can't just fuck off and drink and meet new people. You have to participate.
Yeah, so then I was given a power that Robert regretted immediately.
Yeah. I ended up taking it away for a very long time.
You never gave it back!
In Volume 2.
I never got it back, deadass! I never got it back! I
stole
was
it.
told that I could keep rolling and it would get better, and it never did!
Nope, I stole it fully. Anyways, so it revolved around like the World Tree, or it's also called the Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, which for those that are unfamiliar, it's basically like a tree that spans the nine being the 9 traditional realms in Norse mythology. I don't remember them all. I remember a few: Svartalheim, Niflheim, Muspelheim, and then there's Midgard, which is like traditional Earth, and then there are the other fucking 5 of them that I don't remember and don't care to remember.
Don't matter.
Helheim, places like that. Like, they're all just like Land of the Elves, Land of the Dead, Land of the Giants, Land of the... Like, it's just, they're all different places. Anyways, The background for this, or the setup, was basically that like this place called the World Serpent's Inn, its ability to jump to different places stem directly from its connection with the Yggdrasil, which has been ripped out of its like home like location and stuck in a place in between. And then the Serpent's Inn itself was constructed to be like a vehicle to then drive the routes, like to go to different realms. Except for a lot of fucked up things happen in like the backstory and the preamble to it, where like a spell went wrong. No one expected the giant snake to protest. Like it was all, it all went bad. And so instead of
we did not know any of this.
Yeah, instead of having like full control over the vehicle that you've just spent literally years of your life making, somebody basically threw a wrench in the engine and was like, "Peace, motherfucker." And then, your own spell proceeds to blow his brains out, and you're like, "Cool, well, he's gone now." Like, and that was
the way that lined up with my character ended up being so fucking perfect.
Yeah, and it all worked out very well. But the idea was that the Jormungandr, who's also like another Norse character, who has like basically is long enough in mythology and big enough to swallow the world whole, and is like is destined to fight Thor and Ragnarok and blah 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 blah.
End of the world shit.
Yeah, I mean he's called the World Serpent. He's traditionally seen as a kind of like an evil or kind of like chaotic neutral character because like he's destined to eat the world. He's also a child of Loki because Loki also has a bunch of other children.
And Loki be fucking.
And Loki to be fucking. Loki turned into a horse and it took back shots from a man. Like it's really fucking interesting when you read all of the things that Loki did in Norse mythology. That's not the version I roll with.
I wish you all could have seen his face as he said that. That was the most serious thing I've ever seen this man deliver in his life.
So all this super convoluted, complicated, like all these different concepts basically turned into one kind of solid idea. And that was that Loki, being the trickster god he is, essentially fell in love with a mortal, brought them back to like Ragnarok. The way it's supposed to happen is it's a cycle, and all the characters are always reborn, and they're destined, like it's basically destined to happen every time. Everything goes bad, all the gods get killed, they forget everything, the first human is born again from the tree, and then all the gods start to pop up again, and they can't remember anything. And I really like the idea of maybe somebody like being able to break the cycle, and of course, who fits that better than the person that like is tricky and mischievous? So Loki has a kid named Jormungandr, and then Jormungandr has like the ability to essentially speak a language that only he can speak, and that allows him to like travel between different dimensions. So I kind of took like that world serpent concept and like really elevated it. And so Loki essentially
elevated mythology.
Yeah. I am the guy that elevated mythology. I made it cooler and bigger than it was. So Loki, being like the adventurous, mischievous god he is, essentially starts to speak that same language as his son and uses it to travel to different places, falls in love with this woman in Fairhaven, brings her back, and then doesn't realize, because he forgets, that there's a cycle. So that cycle goes off, Ragnarok happens, he dies, Jormungandr dies, Odin dies, the whole like Norse mythology, like the whole Norse tree dies, but so does she. So then he comes back and he starts to remember things because she wasn't a part of the cycle. And so his immediate response is to be like, cool, let's speed up this process. Let's teach my son how to speak the language quicker, and let's go back and find like basically my wife.
Yeah.
And then he realizes very quickly the mistake he's made, which is he brought somebody that wasn't a god, that had the ability to be reborn, into a cycle that kills things.
Like she was just an elf.
Yeah, she was just an elf that he like fell in love with and brought back.
A dude.
So then he realizes, well, I've lost my wife, and I basically made the mistake that killed her, so now I'm going to do everything humanly and godly possible to try and go back in time and bring, like, basically save her, stop him from making that mistake.
Pulling
like,
a Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, essentially. Like, it's the whole, like, time traveler's dilemma, that whole thing. So his immediate, like, thought process then is like, okay, how do I bully my son into allowing me to, like, do the time travel part of this, too? And his son, being, like, a good neutral character, Jormungandr goes, I can go back in time or forward. You cannot. Like, you will fuck everything up. That's just who you are as a person, father. So, sorry.
You're shit.
I love you a lot. Not gonna let that happen. So he goes, you know what? Fucking bet, dude. And basically starts traveling the multiverse, looking for incredibly powerful sorcerers, like deities, gods, anybody that has a vested interest in being able to travel the multiverse, because, like, who the fuck wouldn't?
Yeah.
And is like, I'm going to use all of your power for one big spell and basically rip the tree, which is what Jormungandr uses to travel, rip the tree out of all the 9, and then I'm going to bind my son to a place in between, drive the tree through my kid. So that way it's basically just a fucking spaceship in the multiverse powered with an infinite engine.
Taking an elevator.
And then I'm going to drive it manually by going into his brain and making a house.
Situation.
I can't tell you how I came up with this really convoluted story. I think I just kind of made it up on the go because now that I'm saying it out loud, it sounds fucking insane. And a lot of this backstory I didn't come up with until I had already made the end. So then I just started plugging in pieces. But that's everything that happens previous to
the campaign starting.
Yeah, previous to the campaign starting. And then there are a lot of characters that are in there, like the people like Freya who married Loki and his wife. Like there's a ring that they find that's kind of like Keloid too, and then I can't remember what the fuck her name was.
Tyrion.
Yeah, Tyrion. And like that was their first indication that like there was something
we found at the end of that campaign, and we had this ring.
Had no fucking clue what it could have meant. They were just like, oh, sick. And then Ragback picks it up and it's like, I'm going to pocket this.
Yeah.
And then the character fucks off. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to say that he didn't take the ring. You have it.
Yeah, because I was the only fucking person that could have known or like put anything together.
So now that I've told you this incredibly convoluted backstory that has absolutely nothing to do with Norse mythology outside of three characters, which roughly are three concepts, which is a tree that can span realms, a serpent,
snake.
Serpent that can speak a language that allows him to travel realms, and a really jaded Loki, which he always is, but this one was a little extra jaded.
Yeah.
So he gets all these people together, and he's like, listen, I'm going to need all of you to basically like recite the same spell from different points in the multiverse to bind my son and the tree in the same location. I'm going to make a house, basically an elevator that can go wherever you want it to go, whenever you want it to go, because that was the important piece, time. And then we all just get to use it, like, as partners in the system. Like, if you help me make it, like, if you're a shareholder in the system, I'll give you a door, and that door will take you to the Serpent's End, and then you can do whatever the fuck you want with it. Go cause multiversal chaos.
Yeah.
He just handed it out willy-nilly to anybody that had basically, like, an ounce of power that was going to help him with the spell.
You want a key? Sure.
Yeah, deadass. Like, you're going to give me your power for 30 seconds, and then we're all going to be rich beyond our wildest dreams. You can get whatever you want. So he starts the spell. And then Jormungandr, being intelligent, is like, something's a little suspicious about this. I don't really trust him not to fuck around and do something.
Yeah.
So then, canonically, what happens is he essentially starts making plans and fucking up several people's lives to essentially get them to do what he needs them to do to break him out of this.
Yeah.
So he, like, purposely sabotages Magnolia's life. He purposely sabotages Ragmad's life, and Ephon's, and Brayon's. Like, he essentially opens doors and portals to places that they shouldn't be open so that they become, like, basically tied to him. Yeah. And their only way out of this fucked up loop is to essentially help him break free of the spell that his, like, son Loki binds him in.
Yeah.
And part of the way that he does that is he essentially cuts out his own heart and then sends it to be bound in a descendant of Tyrion, his love interest, because thought process is he's going to search everywhere for it, but he's not going to look at, like, his, I don't know, like, fucking granddaughter 3 times removed. Like, great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter. Like, surely he's not going to look there.
Yeah.
And he doesn't for a very long time.
Until someone starts causing problems.
Until that particular granddaughter, along with the other several, like, mischievous party members, end up starting, like, some real multiversal chaos, and that's basically just a flare being like, hey, look at me! I can do things that you want to be able to do.
The granddaughter shows up with papers confirming her identity.
Yeah, confirming her identity, and then he ended up...
him.
Yeah. And he was, like, the bartender the whole time, too. He basically, like, consumed the bartender's identity.
So remember
and
the whole thing we said about, like, my character being, like, jaded and not trusting anyone because she was a jaded motherfucker, and, like, she'd had her heart broken a million times because she was always dating around and blah blah blah. And so she didn't trust anyone. And then we introduced shapeshifter. Everyone that you thought was your friend
could definitely not have been your friend.
Was actually the bad guy the whole time, and no one's ever liked you.
Yeah.
So that was a fun discovery.
Yeah, the twist was basically that in an attempt to, like, Loki goes crazy because I wanted to play more on the idea of, like, they're supposed to die in Ragnarok. Like, there's a reason why they get reset, and it's like that their bodies and their brains, while godly, can't handle that much time worth of information.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is, like, basically they're at the very end, He's going insane. He's got his plan together. Like I mentioned, Jormungandr sabotaged it last second. He's like, cool, you're going to kill me? I'm going to kill me first. And basically, yeah, I mean, just kind of beats him to the punch. So everything goes off without a hitch with the exception of the heart, which is the one thing he needed to basically be able to go back in time. So then Loki goes nuts. He's like, well, I can't handle this. I just spent centuries of my life putting this plan together to, like, see my wife. I can't do anything anymore, and basically just goes into, like, safe mode, and his brain just fully shatters. And so kind of the idea behind the character's power in particular was that Loki's a shapeshifter. And so I took that to the extreme. I was like, how do we then turn that into a gameplay element? Essentially, any creature, any being, I mean, literally anything that he had ever seen that was living, he could then shapeshift into. The issue is his brain is very much like a library, and it was at capacity. So when he started to go crazy because he wasn't dying, all of those personalities, all of those beings started to fracture, and you never knew who he was going to be in the next, like, instant you saw him.
Yeah.
So he essentially goes into, like, a hibernation mode and ends up taking over the personality of a bartender and basically bartends the Serpent's Inn for... I've never figured out, like, I never came up with a specific number.
I was assuming eons.
An untold, yeah, basically eons. Like, he sits there at the World Serpent's Inn. It's fucked up. You can't choose where the doors go. You can't choose the time of the doors either. But he just sits there, and he waits. And his brain waits, basically, in, like, a safety mode, trying to piece himself back together until our protagonists from... Now we finally catch up to, like, the first campaign. Our protagonists finally show up with, like, the keys to the door.
Yeah.
Because essentially what he needs is he needs all of the pieces that Jormungandr has, through fucking up their lives, given them to basically free him. Like, the same pieces that would be required to free Jormungandr are the same pieces that Loki or Kiloi would need to then lock him fully up.
Yeah.
And so they walk right into it. And Magnolia, who's the most consequential piece to the whole thing,
if you haven't picked up on...
quickly befriends the
heart.
bartender.
She had the heart.
Yeah, she was the heart. She was physically the heart of the Serpent.
Jormungandr killed her when she was a fucking baby.
And then brought her back to life.
Which is, yes...
Fucked up.
Fucked up.
Yeah, this whole campaign was fucked up.
It was, but I also loved at the table getting to ask the question, wait, did Jormungandr kill a baby?
Yeah.
And then Robert getting to go, yeah.
Yeah, technically.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, basically. And then it, like, it's almost like a curse, like Voldemort, but it actually worked. You know?
Yeah.
Instead of it being like a lightning scar, it's like, no, kid fully got murked. And then got brought back to life with, like, the heart of a world serpent, heart of a god.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is his moment. Like, he's like, fuck yeah. Like, the pieces have just fallen directly into my lap.
Yeah.
And he didn't really play, like, a super consequential part to the campaign at all until the second half. Like,
no,
he wasn't...
because we were all...
He was never present. They never put the pieces together. I never really gave them enough leads to, like, really put it together. Like, it would have been a leap for one of them to go, I think there's one individual behind everything that's happened.
Yeah, that would have been crazy.
Mm-hmm. If someone had just came out swinging with that. I mean, Spencer got pretty fucking close there at the end.
Yeah. The closest they got, that we got to kind of, like, figuring everything out was, there was a part in the campaign where we had gone down and we were, like, walking through Jormungandr.
Yeah,
and I
like
kept making some interesting checks with the flower that I had, which was, we come to learn, like, another, like, portion of the heart of Jormungandr. It kind of got split into, like, two parts because turns out that she was a bastard and she was born in a flower shop and blah blah blah. So
there was a whole lot of fucked up backstory with that.
Yeah, Robert made it so she canonically fucked her half brother, which was not a necessary portion that we needed. No, go ahead, laugh into the mic. That was just a fuck you to me as a person to be like, haha, I'm putting that on you now.
I didn't, like, intend it to be a fuck you as a person. It just lined up with the story. And then I realized that the implication of that story point was that you would fuck your half-brother.
And I said that at the table. And you were like,
intentionally.
Nah. Oh, wait. Yes.
Technically, yes. That is what happened.
But that's besides the point.
Yeah, that's in the second half.
But they were in the snake, and I was making some interesting checks because I finally gotten rid of my negative to Arcana, and I was
She
just
also had
even.
0 preservation of life skills.
No, those didn't exist.
Nope.
So I was just like, can I vibe check the ground? And he was like, what does that mean? And I went like, I don't know, just touch the ground.
I want to touch the ground.
And like see what it's feeling. And
It's such an interesting thing.
which it worked. And
We're
then
in a
the
dead
flower...
snake, and she goes, I want to touch the ground. What does the ground feel like? But like not feel as in like the material, like cold, like what is it feeling right now? Which doesn't make any fucking sense. It's dead. Which, I mean, it did make sense, but I didn't think she was gonna go, let me just vibe check the fucking floor.
It was the right move.
Yeah, I guess it was.
But that's when they basically learned through Magnolia's flower then beginning to grow through her body and root
almost just
into
fucking
the
snatches
snake and try to kill her and be like, oh, you're home.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, the fuck I'm
No, I'm
not.
not. I'm from Elfland.
That's when she learns that she's, in the words of the flower, because someone had talked to plants and it just worked out clutch.
I could have fucking punched Sam in that moment when he goes, yeah, I want to use talk to plants on the flower. And I go, what do you mean you want to use talk to plants? Yeah, I have talk to plants. Like, I can just speak to a plant. Sure, you can do that. Sure, why the fuck not?
And so then we learn
Shit was infuriating.
that the flower says, no, she was never born. Yeah. She's not real. Mm-hmm. And
which
that's
obviously
where they
breeds an
learn.
existential crisis for Magnolia because she's
she's
I
like,
definitely remember having a childhood. My mom says I was born.
She's like sobbing. Someone like taps her on the shoulder and she immediately hits him. It was like a crisis. But
I traumatized Magnolia, which
so many times.
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah, I know.
But she kind of learns, or at least gets a very large hint that she has the soul.
It's not what it seems.
There's
a little more than meets the eye.
Yeah, and everyone in the party is just kind of looking at her like, that was fucked up anyway, and then immediately move on.
Yep. She's like, hey guys, I could have died in that moment also. I think I spoke to a spiritual snake that said it's my father, but like also not. And they were like, that's interesting, I guess. Let's keep walking.
Yeah, there was no...
Yep. No one took the time to be like, wow, that is really odd. I wonder if that's connected to the rest of us that also have all these random magical artifacts that kind of line up
that are all snake themed.
That are all
fucking snake themed.
That are all snake themed.
They
never tried like putting
snakes.
them together. They never tried like tapping them to one another. They're just like, yeah, this is my magical artifact, and I guess it's just like cool to use. Because, I mean, I wanted it to be more than, like, here's a piece of the puzzle that you're going to keep on your person and is not functional. Like, the flower allowed her to teleport. Brayon's bracer gave him a bonus to AC and a bonus to strength. Ragbad's, like, tooth basically allowed him to poison enemies and, like, always track something because that's a fun ranger thing.
Which I don't think he ever used.
Yvonne was... His book gave him spells.
So clutch.
His book gave him spells. So the way that I rolled, every one of these magical items had like an actual backstory. So the tooth that Ragbad uses is actually a chip of the tooth off of the world Serpent. Basically, what it touches can't like it can be found. It can be tracked anywhere. It has like kind of like like it's like a multiverse tracker. And of course, Magnolia's flower. It's an air tag. And then, of course, Magnolia's flower is like half of the Serpent's heart, but also allows her to teleport.
And it was also like a sprig of the world tree. So she was just fucking walking through this bitch like.
Yeah.
It could do whatever she wanted.
Mm-hmm. And then Brayon's like bracer is basically like a piece of a really important door that was basically like the back entrance, if you will. And so it was kind of like an innate part of like the Serpent itself and like kind of like a scale almost. And then Yvonne had a book, and the book like mechanically gave him extra spells. So over time, during like free time, I would allow him to essentially read it, and then if he passed a check, I would give him another spell. So the way that I had like done it is that there have been wizards and like different magical beings throughout history that have compiled notes on Jormungandr's language. It's a dead language. Nobody's ever spoken it with the exception of two people, and that's not Yvonne. That's Jormungandr, and that's Loki. But there are like runes that Jormungandr leaves around. I mean, he basically like scattered himself like little like breadcrumbs to hoping that somebody eventually would figure out what was happening. And it just so happens that there's a particular breed of person, they're called scholars, that like to put things together. And so what I gave him was
Breed of
basically a
person.
book that people have been, like the sorcerers, wizards, warlocks before him had basically taken notes from different languages trying to figure out how to speak the language of Jormungandr, like figuring out what's up with these doors and all these different, like, like multiverses and different locations. And kind of the backstory behind that was that Jormungandr, every time like the book would get left by somebody, Jormungandr would then go back in time, fuck with something so that the book would then get to the next person that he needed it to get to.
Yeah, and that book
He was
ended
kind of
up
like
coming back.
scrying the future to figure out like who he needed to be where to give himself the best chance to like get out of jail. And it ended up in Ephon's hands, and Ephon ended up basically dumping every possible moment of roleplay into learning how to fucking read it.
Truly.
And like the book had a lot of answers. Like the book had a ridiculous amount of answers in it. And so it like the book and the flower were easily the two most important pieces for a while.
Yeah.
Because like one was like the semi like metaphysical manifestation of like the big key, and the other one was like the other one was like the book that tells you how to speak the language. That's also a very important piece of the story. Ephon eventually in the final session puts it all together, and then that's when his partner from like session 1 comes back and is like, "You stole my destiny, motherfucker!"
Yeah, and immediately just goes.
And then locks everybody out of a room and starts brainwashing Ephon and basically doing a different version of the modified memory spell and starts like implanting memories, trying to force him to think that they're still pals, and like it was a whole fucked up thing.
It was fucked. That combat encounter also
crazy.
Wild.
Crazy combat encounter.
We eventually all got in the room, and it was like a small room. It was like a 30 foot by 30 foot. And we immediately, I remember Robert got pissed because we like all had a spell to summon creatures, and there were just bodies in that bitch.
This was a tiny, like 30 by 30 room, and these motherfuckers every 2 seconds would be like, "Yeah, so I'm gonna summon a companion, and it's actually large. Also, I'm gonna summon a companion, and this one's also large. Oh, and also, I have a companion from the spell I just got, and it's medium, but I get to make 2 of them, so basically fucking large." And it's like, cool. Now I gotta start adding pieces to the room because you all can't physically move.
Yeah, so then the room starts expanding, and they're all fighting.
Like
and I remember
different pieces of different rooms start slamming into like the central room that they're in, and
yeah, and it was very scary. And I also went through my own like personal hell during that.
And the way that I roleplayed that behind the scenes, like that was Jormungandr's direct like interference, basically trying to give you all more space to breathe to like survive the combat encounter. Because like Ephon's partner specifically chose a location in a room that like was mostly stable and that was small so that he can control the fight. He was a chronomancer, so time magic. And he had like the way that I did it, he had backup plan on backup plan on backup plan. And then Jormungandr starts basically throwing rooms at the room that they're in and like giving them like a real chance to move and spread and do things. It was really cool. It was really fun. But
what he didn't account for was getting his ass beat.
Oh yeah, no, he got fucked up in the end. He got really fucked up. He was like, "Hey, bro, Ephon, I still love you. You stole my destiny. Like, the book is supposed to be mine, but, like, I'm going to make you think that we're friends and we're going to live happily ever after."
And everyone else in the party
proceeds to get fucking gangbanged by
and
the
we
party.
said, we're not going to let that slide. And we came in and we...
Killed everything died. Everything got killed very quickly. And then,
that was
of course,
also the fight where I couldn't stay in the room.
And then as a wild magic sorcerer, Madison's rolling on this table every 30 seconds and gets like some truly fucking insane, like pops into the ethereal plane. Also gets like 200 points of health. Like it just fucking got wild. That was like, cool, I have no way to kill her now.
It was the one where it's like you roll dice and you take that much damage from every creature within 30 feet of you, and then you gain that
in temp health.
Well, you have 9 bodies within 30 feet of you. And
in a very small room.
My like fucking level 10, if that, character suddenly has
it got a little fucking
280 hit points. And then I had cast a blink, so I just
blipped out with
with that many hit points. And it was something where everyone at the table, I think I've got a video of Robert crying, and I can't remember if it was from that fight, and I can't remember.
Putting my hand in my head in my hands. I don't remember what it was from, but there were many moments in the campaign like that where I was just I couldn't. I couldn't fucking compute,
It
dude.
was
I
either
couldn't
that,
put it
and then
together.
I like had 4 wild magic surges that fight because I had that one, and then
Yeah,
I
it
did
was
one where I went to
ridiculous.
the astral plane. So I had like a fucking timeout
Mm-hmm.
where I was talking to the snake, and then at the end when we had killed the guy,
Mm-hmm.
and then he went, oh, there's one more backup plan. He's gonna pull out this little bead, which is the thing that chronomancy wizards can do.
Yep, they can put spells into beads and then use those beads.
And he did a polymorph, and it was. Robert said, I'm going to roll this D4 to figure out where this bead goes because
he wanted it to hit himself.
Slapped its hand.
And Ifon does a dexterity saving throw and basically fucking yeets it out of his hand. And I was like, well, it's going somewhere, dude.
And it hit me. And then I was a snake. And I was the only bitch who could get us out of the room. And the room starts collapsing.
Yeah.
And...
Yeah, so
and I kept trying to be like, can I tell them to kill me? And Robert was like, no. And I was like, cool. I think I'm just going to start attacking people then to hope that they'll hit me. And they weren't. They were just like, man, she's cranky today.
Yeah, it was it's a fucking time, dude.
That might have been why you were on the ground with your like head in your
that might have been a moment, man. It was a lot, but her flower, for reference, basically the way that I kind of done this mechanically and from a story perspective, being like the heart of the serpent, like the brain essentially just the way that I kind of like to see it was the brain gave the room basically the ability to go places. Like it had that like innate ability to just travel, but it like without the heart, without a drive, without a want. It could never really figure out like where it wanted to go. And so that's why the heart was so important, because the heart was basically like the drive behind everything. And so the flower, basically what I allowed her to do was to act as the heart in that moment, open a door kind of where she wanted to go. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. Basically like asking the serpent kind of like in an odd way, like, hey, homie, this is like your heart. Recognize that. Like, let's go somewhere that I want to go. And then like that was it. And so that's kind of how that worked mechanically.
Which Robert immediately regretted.
Yeah. So
anytime we were anywhere, I could just say, what if we left?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. So
and then we did.
Yeah. I think we got to wrap it up. I think we're just about out of time. I mean, that ends pretty much where campaign 1's at.
Yeah.
I'll talk about like Ifon's fate and some of the things that happen behind the scenes there.
Which I'm so excited to finally hear as a player, because we didn't get to.
Yeah, and I told Spencer specifically not to tell anybody about it. So.
And I tried to bribe him.
Yeah, I told Spencer, I'd sent everybody out of the room and had an individual conversation with him where it was basically him one-on-one with the serpent, and I was like, this is like what happens here never leaves this room. This is a me and you thing, buddy. And he loved that. He loved the shit out of that. And so like he only knows to this day what happened. Maybe I'll talk about it next episode, maybe I won't. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Table Talk. We will see you next time. I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll talk.
Bye!